It's a pleasure to have you join us on Money Matters on TV 360 Nigeria. I'm Okbayemi Owoshedi. We begin with business news. The Nigerian Export Promotion Council has announced that Nigeria's trade volume in 2024 with 7.2 metric tons with a 20.70% increase in value, totaling $5.45 billion. The Executive Director of NEPC, Noye Ayeni, disclosed this during the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment retreat for the presentation of the 2025 roadmap in Abuja. Ayeni highlighted a 20.7% growth in export value to $5.45 billion and expansion to 126 countries, signaling Nigeria's export progress. Ayeni emphasized that NEPC's mandate remains to diversify Nigeria's economy away from oil dependency by promoting non-oil exports. And the Ministry of Finance Incorporated has announced the launch of the 100 billion naira Series 2 offering under the Mofi Real Estate Investment Fund, marking a significant step in addressing Nigeria's housing deficit. According to a statement on January 10th, the new offering builds upon the successful 150 billion Series 1 subscription, bringing the total capital raised under the fund to 250 billion naira. The statement noted that the initiative aligns with President Bola Tinubu's renewed up agenda and is structured to mobilize private sector investment in the housing sector. We'll take a break now and be back with company news. Welcome back. Fidelity Bank has indicated that it will be raising additional funds via private placement to meet the new capital threshold of the Central Bank of Nigeria for banks operating in the country. According to the resolutions from its recently held extraordinary general meeting, which was filed on the portal of the Nigerian Exchange Limited, stakeholders approved the additional raise. Meanwhile, Fidelity Bank PLC successfully concluded the first phase of its equity capital raise, achieving an impressive 237.92% oversubscription in its public offer and its right offer recording 137.73% oversubscription. The Oladele Distribution Company has announced the commencement of its free prepaid meter distribution program for Band A customers within its franchise area. This initiative is part of the ongoing effort to close the metering gap in Nigeria under the Meter Acquisition Fund scheme. In a statement issued on February 11th, Babatunde Lasake, the General Manager of Corporate Communications at EKEDC, confirmed that the distribution is in line with the company's commitment to the Nigerian government presidential metering initiative. The initiative aims to provide prepaid meters to Band A customers at no cost, and the exercise will last for 60 days. We'll go on a break now, but when Money Matters return, we'll be discussing the Nigerian Port Authority increasing tariff by 15%. I'll bring you details after this break. Welcome back. The Nigerian government, through the Nigerian Port Authority, has announced a 15% tariff increase, the first in 32 years. NPA Managing Director Abubakar Danso discloses in Lagos during the stakeholders' engagement meeting. He noted that the 15% port tariff increase is across the board. Now, this comes weeks after the Nigerian Communications Commission approved the telecommunication tariff hike capital at 50%. Represented by the Executive Director of Marine and Operations, Oladele Badmus, Danso explained that the agency had maintained the same rate for over 3 decades, despite significant economic changes, including exchange rate fluctuation, rising wages, fuel and lubricant costs, and inflation. Now, let's get the opinion of an expert on this recent increase. Financial expert Femi Oladele now joins me on the program. Thank you for your time, Mr. Oladele.
Thank you so much for having me too.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be there.
All right. So now it seems like every sector in the country wants to increase their tariff. And the NPA has decided to increase its tariff by 15%. And this is coming barely weeks after the NCC also decided to increase theirs by 50%. Fine. The NPA zone is the first in 32 years. Now, what is your perspective on this increase? Do you believe it's a necessary step to enhance Nigeria's port infrastructure and competitiveness?
Thank you so much for that question. And it's a tricky question because if wherever I swing, there will always be those who will feel that that swing is a wrong swing. So on the left hand side, which is to say, oh, that's a good one. It's a good increase. It hasn't happened in over many decades, and so it looks reasonable. But on the right, also, we begin to look at the timing. Is this the right time, considering what we have going on for us in Nigeria, and also knowing that it's going to affect many, many Nigerian businesses, especially those who have not built enough shocks to absorb economic upheavals. So it's a difficult time, I must say, and I don't want to swing left or right. I want to be in the middle and say that yes, we know that it has been a long time coming, but I'm not sure, and I hold this view respectfully to the federal government and to all other stakeholders that I am not certain that this is the right time for that significant increase because 15% would increase. And you know, in Nigeria, things are easy to go up, they don't necessarily come down easily. So I fear that this increase would is at cross purposes with the government's fight against inflation, really. I before even with the announcement alone, you would see many people already gearing up to begin to increase prices. Even businesses that are not directly impacted by this increase. So I fear significantly that this is not the right time to do this increase. But what has been done has been done.
Well, the NPA gave several reasons for deciding to increase the tariff. The first time in 50 and 32 years, I meant to say, they cited operational costs, particularly fuel and wages, and also with inflation currently at 34.80%. How important do you think it is for the NPA to increase tariffs at this time? And do you also think that the NPA's current rate will be considered competitive in the face of the rising cost of things that we've experienced over time in the country?
So this question, I would like to conceptualize it like a cake. It looks like we have a cake and everyone is taking a slice. Before we know it, we would no longer have a cake. We may not even, it might even become possible that we cannot recognize that there was even ever a cake. Because you look at telecommunications, power, fuel, inflation eating deep into every sector of the economy, and now we have this. It looks like it's a good one, but like Oladele would always say, we should tax prosperity. At this time, I'm thinking about it in a different light. Yes, there are justifications sound reasonable. And I was mentioned that it's unfortunate that the government, the federal government had already approved it even before stakeholders got aware. I was listening to a stakeholder some days ago, and he lamented that he was getting to know after it was approved. So he complained, I'm not certain of the kind of meetings that happened before that decision was taken, but he was lamenting that the decision was taken even before stakeholders were brought on board and that stakeholders were just made aware afterwards. And that's not too good also if that was what happened, because I've not been able to verify that claim. But I believe that while they need those infrastructures to be upgraded, while they need operational efficiency, I believe that that is a way where government can invest and then reap returns in coming years and not expect we give birth to a child today and we expect that child to begin to feed the parent. I don't think that's right. I believe that we have not, I'm talking as a nation now, that we haven't invested in our infrastructure a lot to be able to begin to demand returns, this kind of returns. if developed economies that have invested over the years significant amounts of capital begin to make this kind of request, it won't even make the headlines because they know that they have made those investments. But I'm certain that Nigeria has not made significant investment in that sector to be able to demand this kind of return. And on the second part of your question, concerning the fact that if it is competitive with respect to rising costs, I cannot say that it is competitive, but we have to look at where we are at this time. And considering where we are at this time, I don't think it's the right decision, but it has been taken. So we should let that go and look at ways that we can innovatively survive this phase, or look at ways where we can further talk to policymakers and make them see reasons why this is not the right approach or this is not the right time. Unfortunately, or maybe I haven't seen enough response from other key stakeholders. It looks like everybody has accepted it and we have moved on. And you recall that I mentioned in my last interview with you about the culture of silence. We need to speak up when we know that things are not working the way they should work. And I believe this is an opportunity for stakeholders to do that. I know that those reasons, infrastructural development, they need to get new equipment and all of that, they are significant. But shouldn't the government be investing in that sector at this time and allow that sector to grow to a point where when they make this kind of demands, that people would not even bat an eye? That's what I have to say about that.
Now, like you've rightly said, this has been implemented already and it's like it's here to stay. Now, do you think this increase is sufficient to address all of the problems and the operational challenges that the NPA has mentioned, such as age infrastructure and obsolete equipment? Or do you think additional reforms will be necessary to address all of those challenges?
Significantly, the issue of infrastructural development is a continuous conversation that has to be had. It's just like I recall when the NHIS, now NHIA, was implemented in Nigeria. It felt like that was going to be like, it was going to lead to 100% health coverage for Nigerians. But till date, the national health coverage in Nigeria is less than 10%. So in that same way, the fact that you're taking money from people does not necessarily mean it will resolve issues. Number one is, if the flow of that fund is not even well captured, then all we will see will be maybe a mismanagement in that space, which is a big issue in Nigeria. So if there are no reforms to ensure that even the funds that are collected are well maximized, then we won't see significant progress. Secondly is that I believe that communication with stakeholders, agreement, and the cohesion among stakeholders is significant, and it appears that this has not been done in this case. So there are many other things that need to be resolved, but more importantly, I would say that just money alone is one issue, one factor when it comes to public policy. It doesn't solve all of the problems, and I believe that key stakeholders in that area should be looking to further reforms to ensure that when the money is even collected, it makes a difference. It makes the difference that they are anticipating with minimal negative impact in that sector.
All right, now, do you think there are alternative ways to generate these funds aside from tariff increases?
Absolutely. I work in the financial services sector, so I understand that there are significantly increasing number of innovative financing products and services that can be deployed by government. There are many other approaches that could have been implemented to ensure that the burden is eased off people. Because what this is now projecting to the ordinary man is that this government is all about taxing us. Yeah, you have good intentions, but your good intentions may not necessarily translate to good outcomes. And that's not good for any government or any organization or any establishment generally. So I believe that there are definitely, absolutely different innovative products that could have been implemented to ensure that this did not go this way. Yeah.
So, Mr. Oladele, just like you have also raised concerns, some stakeholders have also raised concerns about the impact of this tariff increase on the cost of goods and services in the country. Now, how do you think this increase will affect both consumers and businesses in the short and long term?
Thank you. I had mentioned that in Nigeria, price flows perception is dangerous.
Yes.
So some people have just had that rates have been increased, and they will just assume that those rate increases are significantly going to impact them as well. And so they would begin to already increase prices just like that. Some people have also felt like, okay, now that I want to, even those that are not impacted, like we have the issue with the dollar. People that are not impacted by the dollar would tell you that they're increasing prices. And when you ask them, they're like, don't you know that the dollar is rising? I mean, that was then anyway. The dollar is currently a bit stable at this time. So I believe that it's going to affect people generally. Secondly, I believe it's going to impact businesses significantly. Nigerians have been engaging in exports, so they are using import services. Also, imports have not stopped. We are significantly import dependent, and so we have significant rise in imports, and so that means export services. And they're business people, they will not bear the burden alone, they will pass it on. And once you pass it on, it's a ripple effect, it keeps going even to the final consumer. And so I fear that there will be significant increases in prices, which is, like I mentioned earlier, going to even affect inflation that we're trying to combat.
All right, so like I mentioned earlier when the interview started, that it seems like all sectors are increasing their tariff. So recently, the custom introduced a 4% fee on board charge increment on their fee on board levy. Now, do you think this 4% FOB by the Nigerian customs on FOB value will interact with the NPA tariff increase? Do you think it can create a compound effect on businesses and traders, since it all has to do with businesses and consumers and traders as well?
Thank you. So I have been trying to look for explicit information on how that tariff will be implemented. Unfortunately, till the time of this interview, I've not been able to find that. So I cannot speak to implementation. But many times with government policies in Nigeria, which is one issue that policymakers should be looking at, we make the policies then say that we would talk about implementation when we get to that bridge. And so that creates a kind of a problem for many people, such that we are not certain. And when there's a lot of uncertainties that affect businesses. So now we have a 4%, we have a 15%. I haven't seen clearly how that interaction would happen. And so I cannot say specifically if there will be a net off effect or a substitution effect yet. I can't speak to that at this time because I don't have that information. But I know that from experience, history in implementation of policies in Nigeria has told us that many times there are lots of moving parts. And because we have low clarity on implementation, sometimes it's difficult for people to have that clarity, and then people begin to say it is this way, it is that way. Before harmonization is done, much harm would have been done to businesses. So I fear also that because we don't have so much of clarity in this area, it might be a significant ripple, compounding negative effect on cost of goods and services.
Quickly, do you believe that the Nigerian government should focus on alternative revenue generation strategies such as public-private partnership or foreign investment to support port infrastructure upgrades without relying solely on tariff increases, since it will affect a lot of citizens and businesses?
I believe that we should have a compendium of policies and implement them on the go. So what I mean is that we shouldn't say, oh, we're taking one and leaving the other, but we should look at how we're able to implement all of our policies within the Nigerian context. I think that's one thing that is very important, not import policies without understanding the significant effects that would have. I would not say that the government should rely only on PPP, no. I wouldn't also say that we should drop tariffs. Tariffs are important. It gives people the opportunity to also demand accountability from government. And so I believe that it's a mixture that I am or let's say a portfolio of policies, and not just one policy, and see how we can move them here and there to see that we get the optimal mix of policies that can help us achieve our goal. So I'm an advocate for mixing policies. I learned something from a mentor. He said that when you are in a fix and you're not so certain of what to do, you are like a runner. And when you are running, you are picking things and dropping to make your running more convenient for you. So that's what I think Nigeria should be doing at this time, getting a mix of policies, a mix of financing options, especially innovative ones, to see how we can make significant progress. There's impact financing, there's PPP, we have the tariffs, we have foreign investments, and we have even indigenous investments and all of those. So I think we should look at a mix and develop a portfolio of policies that helps us to achieve an optimal mix for what we want to achieve.
Right, so Mr. Oladele, we've come to a conclusion now. We've both agreed that the tariff is yet to stay, the increase is yet to stay. And another known fact is that for most situations, whenever anything is increased in Nigeria, the price hardly comes down. So now, the tariff is yet to stay, no problem. So how do you think businesses and consumers can adjust to this new increase, knowing fully well that it's going to impact their day-to-day activities and their livelihood? So, like, how exactly should people prepare to adapt to this new increase?
I wish I have a magic wand that I can just wave and just give everybody a magical level playing where the impact is zero rated on us, but that is not the case at this time. I would start from businesses, especially small businesses, and especially those that are not significantly impacted by this tariff, to calm down and not just begin to increase prices because they have had news that NPA has increased the tariff. Secondly, the second class of businesses are those that use port services. I believe that they should begin to assess their exposure levels. Not all businesses have enough shocks to be able to absorb the impact. There will be those who already have built shocks over time. They can absorb it, some cannot. So I believe that for those who can, they already have systems in place that help them to maintain a level of stability. For those who cannot, I believe, and this is what I've been saying and been preaching to especially young people who want businesses, innovation. How can you structure your processes, your activities to ensure that the impact of that 15% is minimal on your business, and what you then pass on to consumers is also limited to ensure that you keep your flow of customers. In the past, you would see biscuit wrappers. These days, you see that same biscuit wrapper, but it's mostly air inside. They maintain their quality, but they reduce the quantity. So there are innovations around each business that can be adopted to ensure that you keep providing value to your consumers, but you're also not bearing, because if the business dies, then there's no value in that. We don't want Nigerian businesses to die. So we need innovation in that space. For individuals, I think we should be calm and see how it plays out, and begin to prepare our budgets and our pockets for the impact. The impact for some people will be higher than for some others, and so prepare for the impact. Yeah.
Financial expert Femi Oladele, many thanks for lending your thoughts on the program.
Thank you so much. You have a great day.
And you too, sir. Well, that's it on this episode of the program. Many thanks for joining us. I'm Okpeyemi Owoseni. See you next time.